Welcome to the podcast, Cathy. Thank you so much for joining me and being willing to share your story today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Oh dear, where do I begin? How long have you got? So I am a English-born, now Australian, so we're permanent citizens of Australia. And my background is teaching psychology, hypnotherapy, life coaching, counseling, sociology. So I'm very, very interested in human behavior. I am a child empowerment coach. So I write children's books that are empowering to the reader. And I also coach children in connecting with their inner brilliance and embracing who they are and using their pain points for power and things like that. So yeah, it's something I'm quite passionate about, and mother of 5, so I've got plenty of inspiration at home.
Plenty of pain points as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time out of, being a mum of 5 to do this interview. Are we going to get interrupted today?
Probably not, because I'm letting them have that rare pocket of electronic time. So
nice
I
one.
very much doubt we'll be disturbed in the next hour.
They'll make the most of it. Great.
Absolutely.
So that is a really interesting combination of skills that you have learnt over the years and embraced. What led you down this path of being a child empowerment coach?
I had a challenging childhood myself. So right from a young age, I was looking for answers, looking for ways to feel better about myself, looking for how I fit into the world, because it was a little bit dysfunctional at home. So I didn't really have that scaffolding to create the personality and character that I thought I should have. I always felt a disconnect. And then naturally went into teaching. Love being around kids. I mean, the honesty, the imagination, the lack of the walls that they haven't built up yet, so they're very free and they're very expressive and honest, and I just loved that. They were my best teachers for sure. So I went into teaching, and I realized in teaching, particularly where I was, that there was like a disconnect between how the kids were feeling and how the schools were addressing that. And, I've worked in schools where the children were going through something like a fear-based thing of maybe moving to the next step in their lives or whatever. And it was sort of brushed under the carpet a little bit. And I was not a fan of that. I was a fan of sitting on the floor with them and revealing some of my fears. They revealed their fears. We talked it out. We looked at how to turn those pain points into power and how to reframe experiences to empower them. And that's the bit I loved about teaching. So I'm not so hot on the curriculum, which is not great for a teacher, which is why I'm not a teacher anymore, because I just wanted to know who the kids were, what their superpower was, how we connect them to that, how we, because once they connect to that, it's magical. Like, every area of their life shifts. They become this incredibly generous, kind-hearted, patient, wonderful, citizen of the classroom, the world, whatever. And it doesn't turn into arrogance, which I think a lot of adults sometimes fear. But when you empower a child, it turns into empathy and connection and patience, and they're just wonderful belief in themselves that they have such a high self-esteem and connection to their own inner genius that they don't need to be nasty to anybody because they're completely comfortable in their own skin. So that's when I wanted to take that message wider. So I started my Positive Mindset for Kids series, where we're dealing with things like body image and self-love and bullying and all of those sort of things. So yeah, it's sort of been a sort of passion project for me all throughout my life, just because I've had so much darkness and struggle to get to any sort of enlightenment, and I wanted to pass down these sort of pockets of wisdom that they can take with them at a young age so that they go into adolescence and adulthood with a much better arsenal to access when they're dealing with these difficult things in the world.
Yes. And so is this why some kids will play up?
I have found in my teaching career that the kids that play up are completely disconnected to themselves and each other. So, for example, when I was teaching, my first class ever was really challenging. Like for the first 6 weeks, I thought I've chosen the wrong career. I'm not built for this. This is super hard. Like my classes off the wall. They were all just disruptive and,
Was this
nasty and,
in the
all of.
UK?
Pardon?
Was this in the UK?
Yeah, in the UK. And I just was saying to my husband, I've done the wrong thing here, and because all of their behavior was really challenging. They didn't gel as a class. They were disconnected with each other. And I reflected on it. We have 3 terms with 6 half terms. So on the first half term holiday, I sat and I thought, okay, I'm the adult in this situation. What do these kids need? They need love. So I'm going to go back and I'm just going to love them, and we'll just see how that goes. And so I went in and I just loved them, loved them, loved them, loved them, guided them, disciplined them, yes, but with love. And everything shifted, and the whole energy of the class shifted. The interconnectedness between the children shifted. And there was one particular boy in there, let's call him George. So George went through his days hitting everybody. He had no friends. He academically wasn't strong, so in a year 5 child, he didn't put any vowels in words. There's obviously been a gap there in his, so he hasn't connected to his education, etc. And he was just this lost, lonely, isolated, angry little boy. So very difficult when he's going around punching everybody, because then every day you're dealing with different families and explaining, yep, absolutely, I'm onto it. This, I'm really sorry about that, and this is what we're doing, and all this sort of thing. And so I put this chart in place where he had 20 opportunities in the week to get a sticker for each session of the day of the week for not hitting anybody. So he only had to get 15 out of 20, which ironically means he could have hit somebody 5 times out of 20, but it wasn't 20 times out of 20. But when we started focusing on just that, let's be kind with our, let's be kind with our hands, let's be kind, and he got a reward. So we were celebrating him, and that very, very quickly that changed that behavior. So very, very quickly he didn't hurt anybody anymore, which was amazing, because that's the first thing we needed to address with him. And then the next thing was he didn't have any friends, which is one of the reasons he was acting out. So we did this thing, or I got a jar with these little glass beads, and for every tiny little thing he got right, like he might have picked up a pencil or put it away without being asked, or he might have held the door for somebody, or he, it didn't have to be academic. And I would stop the class and say, hey, everybody, George has just done this. This is another bead in the jar. And every bead was a minute's extra play. So on a Friday, when all of the classes lined up to go in, we lined up, and then everybody else went in, and I said, right, guys, because of George, you're getting 6 more minutes extra play. Well, guess what? George became popular. Everybody loved George. Thank you, George, for doing all of that. He got friends, and everything fell into place for him. And I think, traditionally, we've got this punishment system, but it separates the child even more from the people that they're trying to connect with. Now, I do believe that, you do something, you take responsibility for it, you do whatever you need to do to make it right, and then we move on. But the next step is why did you do that? And how do we connect you in, and help you scaffold these friendships, which is what you're desperately wanting and asking for in the most inappropriate way possible. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but children do respond very quickly when the right scaffolding is put in place.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to say I am terrible at analogies, but I'm going to use this one anyway, because we just got a puppy a few months ago, and I got a trainer in, and it was all about reinforcing the good behavior. And you don't punish the bad behavior, because actually it's not the puppy's fault. It's
Yeah.
usually you're the owner. It's your fault. You didn't let them out, so that's why they peed on the carpet. And yeah, this positive reinforcement, but how easy it is to focus on the negative, the punishment, and actually have to pull yourself up on that. Now, I don't I've got a daughter and I was very much an attachment parent. So I didn't just like leave her out there to cry until she was quiet like we did with the puppy in the early days. But yeah, the positive reinforcement, I think it doesn't come naturally. Often when things are going well, we just ignore it. And it's when the shit hits the fan, we start to focus on it. And then where our attention goes, all the energy flows.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's perfect. Perfect example. And you know, us as adults, when we mess up, we know we've messed up.
Yeah.
We don't need everybody to point it out. We need people to remind us of who we actually are, and that this mess up was a one-off, it was an accident, it was a mistake, it was a miscalculation, whatever it was. And we need to be reminded of who we are at our core and refocus our energy in that direction. So, you know, children are no different to us. They don't want to be reminded of all the times they got it wrong, you know. And I remember going in one day, I did relief teaching for, excuse me, for a year 6 class. And in there were some really big, you know, farming stock lads, much bigger than me. And, you know, one had ADHD, one had ASD, and they had, you know, these sort of other things to negotiate in the classroom. And one particular boy who was a lovely kid. And I went in and we spoke to the teacher who I was taking over from the day. And she had this little sticker chart for him. And she said, right, he gets a smiley face for every session, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, then I'll know how he's got on. I said, yeah, awesome, great, really looking forward to that. And I said, oh my goodness, John, look at yesterday, you got all smiley faces. And the teacher turned another day back and she said, yeah, but look at that day, it's all sad faces. And I was just like, oh no, there's no winning.
Yeah.
You know, why would you bring that up? Do you know what I mean? And like, why don't we just ride this wave of positivity and take it in that direction? Why are we lingering on, you know, things that happened 2 days ago? That's, you know,
Yes.
it's not helpful.
Yeah. And sometimes as adults, we're so unaware of our own behavior.
Yeah.
And I often see the hitting is the harm. And whenever I talk about releasing stuff from your body, whether it be emotions or energy, is that we do it in a safe way. And one of the rules is that you don't harm others. And so hitting is harming someone if you hit them. But did you ever teach that, okay, you can let this physical energy out, but not on a person? You can let it out on this?
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, that's something I do with my own children as well. It's okay to validate every emotion. Like, I'm not suggesting that we try and pretend things aren't happening. You know, I believe in having the full human experience. But I say to my children, you've got this frustration, you've got this anger, that's okay. You're completely allowed to have these feelings and they're valid. But go out on the punching bag and get them out, or go for a run, or go on the treadmill, or go for a swim, or get it out for sure, because you don't want that trapped in your body. You need to get that out in some way, but in an appropriate way, where we're not, you know, and also, you know, I've just been through something with my eldest daughter, and she had a situation, and we're very much the family that we don't knee-jerk react. So we say, sit with it, work through it, and think about how you're going to respond tomorrow, not in the heat of the moment. So it's about having the feelings for sure, but learning strategic ways of how we're going to use those in positive ways to empower us moving forward, so that we're not having the heat of the moment. Oh, I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't. Because when we're in that panicky state, you know, our brains aren't functioning at an intellectual level. You know, we're on the fight or flight response. We're, you know, our adrenaline's pumping, we're mad, we're this, we're that. And so those aren't the times to be making big decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's okay. You've got lots to say. And for me, anger is usually, it's a healthy emotion and we all have it. Many of us are not very healthy with expressing it, either explosive or actually just put that wall up and don't even express any anger. And for me, I believe that anger expressed healthily is usually what allows us to create and transform our ideas. And I guess that ties into you saying that they have that inner genius, they have that gift. And if they channel that energy there, this is when the anger doesn't get expressed in a harmful way. Is that right?
I do feel that when you are connected to who you're supposed to be, and when you embrace every area of yourself, the perceived good and the perceived bad, right? I don't believe in the good and bad. I believe that every part of us functions to support us in some way. But when you have completely embraced who you are, you know who you are, it doesn't matter what other people say then, actually, because you've got that steely confidence within yourself that you think, yeah, that's not true. I know who I am. The true people in my life know who I am. And, you know, we've just had a situation with one of my other children, as I said, lots of inspiration at home. And they've been going through a terribly difficult time when, you know, they've been treated quite badly by people who are hurting.
Yes.
So we have a lot of empathy for those people, even though they're attacking us quite viciously in that sense. I can see the pain behind that.
Yes.
So I actually feel quite a lot of compassion and empathy towards that person. So I think, wow, you must be really unhappy to do that,
Yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And, you know, I've said to my kids, because they've said, oh, they've said they're going to say this, they're going to say that. And I said, great. Because I said, the right people will listen and the right people won't listen.
Yeah.
I said, it's like natural selection. I said, it will just, you know, streamline your environment so you know that the people that are in your experience are meant to be in your experience. So we can let go of that anxiety towards that, trying to control everything and everyone outside of us.
Yes.
Because we just have to have that trust that everything's happening beautifully, even the stuff that is packaged in a way we wouldn't have liked, we wouldn't have anticipated, wouldn't have asked for, because guidance does come in ways that are wrapped differently to what we were hoping for, yeah? But we just trust, we go with it, and it just naturally sorts out. And the thing is, I've said as well with my kids with these particularly difficult experiences was, you need to just make peace with it, let go. And they have actually sent messages, almost not of love, but of friendship, and saying, this isn't working. We're not supposed to be, you know, friends. I wish you well. We can be polite to each other in school, but we're not going to do this anymore, sort of thing. But I wish you well. And it's being able to let go of that, because I said, if you give it attention, you're feeding it. It's going to escalate and grow. But if you just detach yourself from it and move in a different direction, it has no choice but to fizzle out, and just, you know, everything will resolve.
Yeah. Don't water the weeds.
Absolutely.
Can you go into a bit more of your journey? So you talked about your childhood and upbringing, and then we've had a little bit of a chat before about some of your own challenges as well.
Sure. So I was raised in England, so step up a lip, you know, let's be very even, let's be very neutral. So not excessively anything, you know, and that was quite difficult, because you can't be angry, you can't be excessively happy, because that might be boastful, you know. That's how I was raised, and there's no judgment or criticism there. It's just observation of those of the parameters that I was brought up in. But what you tend to do is then suppress everything. And so you feel anger, you suppress it. You feel, you know, oh, I'm proud of this, but you don't say anything because it might be seen as boastful or whatever. So you keep keeping a very tight grip on everything. And then when I was 17, I got very sick, really sick. And I was in excruciating pain, and wasn't sure why it was happening. And then I was hospitalized for a month, and they were doing all these tests and they couldn't find out. At one point they thought I was going to die, because I was in just the most excruciating pain of my life. Every single joint was just seized and just incredibly painful. I came up in a terrible rash all over my body, and they didn't know what it was. So it took them 3 weeks to diagnose me. And it turns out I had adult onset Still's disease, which is a rheumatic fever, and basically attacks all of your joints at the same time, which is not ideal. And at that time, the treatment was copious amounts of aspirin, which then caused lots of other problems in my body. So it was a really difficult time to negotiate through. And I mean, I remember being a 17-year-old, young, fit, healthy, and I was in the mall, and a 80-year-old woman gave up her chair for me. That's how sick I was, like I was going to fall over, sort of thing. So really not a nice disease. And no accident, because I know I've repressed so much. It had to come out somehow. And in me, it came out in illness. It came out in depression. you know, all those I've got autoimmune things, and now I'm starting to access and touch base with and release my emotion. But when you haven't been used to doing that, what is it? How do I identify it? Why is it coming up? What's the trigger? So it's been a real journey of exploration for me. But the good thing is, because I know how it's impacted my life in that autoimmune way, my children are very good at expressing themselves, and we identify the emotion and we look at the reasons behind it and we use it in a very positive way. But that's still something I'm working through myself as an adult, because I've had years and years of programming in a different direction.
Yeah. And so do you have many symptoms of the AOSD now?
So I'm in remission. So I've had 3 flares. So I just live in remission. So I actually, at the beginning, I fought the AOSD because I didn't want it. It's not who I wanted to be. It was holding me up from doing everything. You know, it was just a real, I don't know, obstacle in my life, stopping me from doing everything I wanted to do. And at the point where I surrendered to it and just embraced it as part of myself, but not who I am, it's just part of who I am. And once I embraced it and I sort of started to dance with it and understand what it was trying to tell me, and you know what? It keeps me safe, because I'm the sort of person that I will go 24/7, full on. If I've got a project, you know, I'm a very busy person. I've got 5 children, I've got my own business, my husband works away, so I do it pretty much on my own. And the Still's disease just gives me that little check-in, that I might get a little twinge and I go, oh, okay, I need to reassess, I need to calm down, I need to meditate, I need to go to bed early, I need to, you know, so it's a really good sort of warning system for me, that keeps me from being ill. So, but the minute I actually embraced it and started to learn how it was empowering me in my life, that's when I became well again.
Yeah. I like to call it, for me, it's my skin, my internal barometer. And it doesn't have to reach that crisis point, that really painful point. And I love it when people do begin to appreciate the ailment, the discomfort, the illness, the disease that they have, and see what it does actually have to teach them. So nice to hear you say that and share with us all the background as to why you think it would flare. And so technically you can stay completely in remission as long as you keep balanced and you keep on that path that you want to be as well.
Yeah.
So what else has happened? You've got 5 kids. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so 5 children, 3 of my children have ASD, so 3 are autistic. And that's been the most amazing blessing, gift, just incredible, wonderful addition to our lives. So ASD children have a completely different way of looking at the world. So for us as a family, it's been a wonderful experience of expansion of consciousness, you know, reframing of experiences, getting different perspectives. And it's really made us much more tuned in to people, able to see very clearly people's intentions, because we've got very good at looking at not what people say, we're very good at looking at what people do. So a lot of the time there's confusion and conflict because people are saying all the right things, but they're not following it up with the behavior. Well, because with my ASD children, we've had to explicitly teach them the skills that you and I take for granted. So they can't read facial expressions. And it only really dawned on me during COVID when I came back from LA just at the peak of COVID. And I submitted for testing because it was just at the beginning of it all. I actually had a cold, so I had all of the symptoms from coming back from LA. So I submitted myself for testing just really to protect my community and make sure that, you know, I wasn't putting anybody at risk. And we were all lined up for 3.5 hours. I felt like I was in Shaun of the Dead. Have you ever seen that? I was expecting zombies or something to run around the corner. Yeah, I felt like this apocalyptic scene where we were all in these masks and there were all these people and we were in a line, and it was all very, very surreal. But stood in this line with all these people with masks on, I felt completely isolated from them. And it suddenly dawned on me, wow, this is how my kids experience the world. And that was a really interesting insight for me, because I really got them at a whole new level, that I understood, they get very anxious when they're in company because they can't read, are you happy with me? Are you sad with me? Am I offending you? Have I made you angry? They don't get that. They understand if you're feeling happy, sad, angry, but they can't immediately identify that. And also they're not sure why you're feeling like that. So oftentimes, and look, I'm not an expert on autism. I'm an expert on my children who have autism. There's a different thing. But with my kids, they get very anxious socially because they're scared of saying the wrong thing, because they can't tell whether they've said the right thing or the wrong thing. So it's about being very open, very explicit, saying what you mean, meaning what you say, and marrying your words with your behavior. And that's something that we've learned as a family that we're very, very good at, is identifying when people are saying one thing but doing another thing. We identify that very quickly, because in our world we're very explicitly doing those things in partnership.
And it's the body language as well that gives off a different vibe and energy, isn't it?
Absolutely. And with me, I've got resting bitch face. So constantly I'll be perfectly in my zone of bliss, and people go, oh my God, what's the matter with you? And I'm like, I'm actually really happy right now. But I've just got, if I'm not constantly smiling, I look like I'm really pissed off. So in our house, that's been pretty exhausting for me, because my kids would go, oh, Mum, what's the matter? And I'm like, I'm fine, I'm just tired, and I'm having to put this smile on, because you have to be very over the top with everything just to reassure them, sort of thing, because they don't get those subtle cues. So that's been a really interesting thing, and made me acutely aware of how I must look in public when I'm completely content. But so no, it's been great. And interestingly as well, I've raised my kids and to a very high standard of behavior. So although, yes, sometimes they have sensory meltdowns, and that's a different thing. That's a different thing to behavior. That's okay. We need to just chill you out. We need to get you somewhere dark and quiet, so that, because they feel everything intensely. Like, there's this misconception that autistic kids don't feel emotion, or they don't identify emotion. That's wrong. It's the opposite of that. So if you're hurting, they feel it so intensely that it's overwhelming. And you imagine that you're a receptor to everybody around you. So when they come home from school, they're just exhausted. Like, they just have got nothing else to give. They need to go into a quiet place so it's dark and calm. And so they need to just detach, because they're empaths. Yeah, they take everything on. So yeah, that's been really interesting. And with them, I find that my kids bring out the best in people, or they bring out the worst in people. It's very revealing. So I know with my daughter, my youngest daughter, she's 3.5.
Can I ask how old all of your kids are, and how old are the ones with ASD?
Yeah, so my eldest is 18, so she's neurotypical. Then I've got Tristan.
Does that mean she's normal?
Yep. So then, what's normal?
What is normal? Sorry.
Then Tristan's 15, he's ASD. Then Noah's 11, he's neurotypical. And then Caleb's 7, he's ASD, and Taya's 3.5, and she's ASD. And Taya's the most severely autistic, so she's nonverbal. She's been the most exhausting since she was born. She was born prematurely, and she's just been fiery and feisty and determined and everything from day one. So it's been really exhausting with her. And she's been nonverbal. Not that she wasn't intelligent enough to speak, she just refused to. She was just like, I don't want to, I'm not doing it. And that was it. And you have to wait till they're ready, and then suddenly they get in the flow. And the boys were both delayed in their speech, but not as severely as Taya. She's just so fierce. You know, she was a tiny little doll. When I've never had a premature baby. My babies have always been big. They've always been 2 weeks late. So this was a real new experience. And I actually nearly died having Taya. So it was all very traumatic. But, you know, she was a week into being in the ICU and she ripped her feeding tube out. And I said to my husband, she's coming home. She's ripped her feeding tube out. And the doctor said, oh, this is your fifth. You can take her home. And luckily we took the car seats. I said, oh yeah. So right from day dot, she's been super feisty. But she expresses joy through sound. And, you know, we've been out before and I don't allow bad behavior with my kids. We've got very high standards of behavior. So if they're behaving badly, I'll deal with it, regardless of any diagnoses. You know, if they're behaving badly, we deal with it because that's not what we expect from our family. And we were waiting. My husband was in the ICU. He'd had an accident, been flown home and had to have emergency surgery. So he was upstairs in the ICU. I had to go to this hospital and both of the children needed blood tests, my 2 youngest ASD kids. And I was dreading it, like, you know, really anxious about this because I know they're not going to enjoy it. I don't know how Taya's going to react because she can be very dramatic with her reactions to things. And so we're waiting in this room, and because I explained to the staff what we were doing and they got more staff in, so we were waiting an extraordinarily long time under hot lights in a hot environment. They were doing building in the room next door, so it was super noisy, and my kids were behaving beautifully. I was like, yes, thank you. And Taya was expressing herself through joy. So she was loud sounds. So she was playing with her brothers and she was loud sounds because at that point she wasn't speaking at all. And, you know, we had these 2 ladies were sat in the waiting room and they were just very, very loudly criticizing Taya, criticizing me, criticizing my parenting. Now I'm worried about my husband because he's in the ICU. I'm anxious about having my kids' blood tests. I'm absolutely exhausted. I've had a week of trauma dealing with the medical stuff and all the rest of it. And normally I'm quiet. I don't say anything. I just think, let it go with love, let it go with love. But on this particular day, I didn't. And I turned to them and I said, I'm terribly sorry if my daughter expressing joy is upsetting you in any way. But her daddy's upstairs in the ICU. She's waiting for a blood test. We've waited an extraordinarily long time. She's autistic. I said, I'm doing my best. And I don't normally speak. I normally just let it go, let it go, let it go. And these women looked really forlorn and embarrassed, you know, and they had their blood test, and in fairness to them, they came afterwards and they apologized, and I said, well, thank you for that, I appreciate that, but possibly in the future maybe you could look for an opportunity to support rather than criticize, because you really don't know what's going on in somebody's life. Absolutely. And there was a guy in the room and he came and sat next to me and he said, and I thought, well, here we go. You know, I was just not in the mood on this particular day. And he said, I just wanted to tell you, he said, I actually work with autistic children. And he said, I've watched your children this morning. And he said, they are absolutely delightful. And he said, you're doing a wonderful job. I went, thank you so much. I was like, oh my God, you know. But it's interesting that either people look at Taya and they go, oh, look at her. She's energetic. She's vibrant. She's joyful. She's giggly. She's wonderful. Look at the energy inside her. Or they go, oh my God, contain that child. So it's really interesting and revealing about who we're around as to how they interpret my kids.
Yeah. And kids are such a great trigger for us as parents, but also, as you say, for other people as well. And I talk a lot about judgment. So don't judge until you've actually been in that person's shoes. So come from that place of compassion and try and understand that, hey, maybe they've got a lot going on.
Absolutely.
And so how did you cope? I don't like using that word, but what was your experience as a mum now going, I've got 3 ASD kids? Was it like you being diagnosed with the Still's disease, of like, was there a period of not accepting at all?
No, but when we got the diagnosis for each one, I did cry. And that was just, nobody wants their kids to have extra challenges to overcome. And so I did cry when the doctor told me, but it wasn't because I didn't love them exactly for who they are, because to me they are incredible. Like, they're going to change the world. All of my kids are just beautiful, lovely, kind, generous souls. They're intelligent. They're just, I know they're mine and I'm biased, but they are wonderful humans. So it wasn't that. It was just, oh gosh, I hope people give them a go. That was my thing. I hope people just embrace them for who they are, and I hope they connect with them as who they are. And because as a mother of autistic children, I have spent so many hours tirelessly preparing them to function in the world. But what I find is the majority of neurotypical parents don't prepare their children to be inclusive and empathetic and to reach out to somebody who might be experiencing things a little bit differently. I think, I'm not a big fan of people being in boxes for obvious reasons. And we as a family are very inclusive, very empathetic, very kind. If we see someone sitting on their own, we'll go and sit with them and we'll introduce them in. We don't like people being on the outside. And I do feel sometimes frustration when I see my kids hurting because, those opportunities aren't being scaffolded because they don't quite fit into the box. And I think there is an opportunity for all parents and all adults and everybody to create this space of acceptance and understanding. And when we see something that's a little bit different, how about expanding our experience and learning more rather than disregarding it immediately?
Yes. And so on that, do you have any advice for parents of neurotypical kids on what they should do to help them become more inclusive and not as judgmental? What would your advice be to them?
Well, as a parent myself, to all of my children, when they have altercations with others, we sit down and we analyze the situation. So even when people have behaved nastily, viciously, whatever, which we've just actually dealt with over Christmas, we go, why would they be acting like that though? What must their experience be like for them to be acting like that? Because we don't act like that towards other people, because we're in a kind, loving, supportive family. We've got all our ducks in a row, in a sense. Who has got all their ducks in a row, but you know what I mean? And I said, there must be something there. There must be something missing. So we don't approach things as an us and them. And that doesn't mean we have to tolerate any behaviors that we're not happy with, that don't fit into our standards, boundaries, values, etc. But what it means is we have an understanding of the other person and why they might do that, and have some empathy there. So I call it radical empathy, right? So even when someone's hurt you, you're able to see why they've hurt you, which not only enables you to feel empathy with that person and possibly also go as so far as to try and have a resolution for everybody in the situation, not just yourselves, but it also frees you, because you don't have to take it personally, because you can see that's where that person was on their evolutionary path. That's why they reacted the way they did, because they don't know any better right now. In 10 years' time, they might know better. But at the moment, they're on survival mode, they're doing this, they're doing that, which sort of allows you to detach yourself from it and see, okay, it wasn't because of me, it wasn't a deficiency in me, it was just where they were in that time. I don't need to drag this on with me. I can release that. And so I think instead of immediately going to the us and them, which I completely understand, like, if someone's hurting somebody that you've loved, or there's been a miscommunication or whatever, you do want to protect your own. Of course you do. It's human nature. But once you've worked through that feeling, you don't need to react, and you sit with it and you let your intelligent brain come forward and you start analyzing why and the reasons and whatever. It gives everybody just a better chance of a positive resolution for everybody, an opportunity to learn how we're going to use that experience to empower us to the next level when we move forward, etc., etc. So with my children, they do roll their eyes at me, because they'll tell me what's happened. I say, okay, so what was your part in it? And they're like, oh, mom. And I'm like, no, let's think about it. Let's, and they're like, oh, for God's sake. But we sit down and we say, okay, what could they have done differently? Did they misjudge the situation? Could they have handled it a little bit better? Could they, we analyze that not in a judgy, blame fault way, but in a let's empower us. So when we move forward, we're better informed and we've got, more tools in our toolbox. But also, okay, where's that person coming from? Why did they do that? And, can we then understand what it is? And can we detach from it and move on? And we've had situations where, I've had people come into my experience and try and involve me in drama and all sorts of things that I'm just not a fan of at all, because I've only got a certain amount of energy and attention and I'm not going to give it to that. And I'm able to say, I just wish you well. I genuinely wish you well. I'm not going to allow that into my experience, but there's no judgment from me. There's no anything, just you need to go and sort yourself out over there while I carry on doing this, because we're not aligned at the moment. And I think if we can go, so it's not a us versus them drama conflict, if we can approach it in a way that we're looking for connection instead of reasons to be offended. And we all know what it's like to feel on the outside, and I think it's when you're on the inside it's easy to forget that.
Yeah.
And I think it's when you're on the inside, it's your duty to reach out to that person, and they might not even end up in your particular group, but you might facilitate ways for them to connect with other people. And look, we're all looking for connection and belonging.
Yep. Absolutely. And I love the process that you take your kids through. And I think as adults, many of us need to hear this. I work with adults who have a lot of stored emotion inside of themselves and take them through a very similar process. And it is actually reflecting on that experience that they've had in their life. And I take them through a verbal dialogue, but get them to feel the physical sensation in their body. But you explained it in a very similar way, is that they realize their role in the situation, so taking responsibility that they took a part in it. And then it's about, well, what could have been done differently? What could that person have said to you that you needed to hear at that time that they weren't able to communicate? And it really is about strong communication skills. And so when they hear back what they wanted to hear, often they come from a place of understanding. And then they go back and they heal their inner child. But because they didn't have someone like you in their life that was able to facilitate this process for them, so they never got to hear what they needed to hear. And then what happens, it's amazing, and it doesn't matter how old that experience or that trauma is it no longer wastes space in their body or in their mind. It doesn't hold space there for them. As you say, you choose now whether or not you take it on or not. You don't have time for that because you're busy. But sometimes people just get so consumed by these past experiences that it holds them back in life. So yeah, if we can teach our kids to be more emotionally expressive, and you said this very early on that your upbringing didn't possibly encourage that emotional expression. And I get a lot of parents say to me, well, I want to be a better parent. I'm like, well, okay, we have to go back and we have to teach you how to express and communicate, because you'll keep having these situations in different shape, ways or forms until you learn to express and get your point across and to be able to stand up for yourself. And when you do that and your kids see that, then you can role model for them, and then you can better educate them how to become emotionally expressive themselves.
Absolutely. And I feel very strongly as well from a parenting perspective that my children are not an extension of me. My children are their own people, and they've been gifted to me because I'm the best mum for them. Do you know what I mean? I truly believe that. And, in our family, there's no blame and there's no fault. There are responsibilities and consequences, don't get me wrong, like, if these things happen. But, one of my kids woke me up at 1:30 the other morning and came in and said, Mum, I really need to talk something over with you. And I'm like splashing water in my face. I'm so tired. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. Come in. And, we sat and we talked for 2 hours on what they needed to process. And there was no judgment from me. You know, they're on their path, they need to learn their lessons, and they're not afraid of me going, right, well, that's it, you're grounded. You know what I mean? They're like, I'm really glad you brought this to me. Let's talk it through. What are the things that we're learning here? What does that say about you as a person? Is that who you want to be, or do we want to tweak anything? Is that, you know, what character do you want to build? What sort of adult do you want to be? And we just talk about all these things, and we talk about who the other people involved and what they might be going through and all the rest of it. And, you know, my kids know they can bring absolutely anything to me. Now, that's not meaning to, like some things they might bring to me and I might understand it. And I say to them, look, I don't understand this. I don't understand why you made those choices or why you want to make that choice. But, you know, I'm here to talk it through with you. And I need to understand how you fit into it all, because this is your journey. I'm not supposed to understand your journey. You're supposed to understand your journey. I'm here to guide you and support you and give you whatever tools and resources I can to get you from point A to B via X, Y, Z, Z, H, you know, that there's never a straight line. But I think this open communication only works if we turn up and we leave our prejudgments, we leave our critical selves, we leave our, you know, punishment, right, wrong aside, and just listen, you know. And my kids have brought things to me, and I had one situation a few years ago with my eldest girl, and she brought something to me and we talked it through, and I said, just leave it with me, and I need to think this through, because she's my pioneer, she's my eldest, so I go through everything with her first. And I'm then evolving as a parent and trying to find my feet and what's the way forward here, where's the book that tells me, oh my gosh. And in the end I just said, okay, I've thought about it, that wasn't ideal, don't do it again, let's move on. And then she burst into tears and she said, but you need to punish me. And I said, no, I don't, because look at you. You've given yourself a harder time than I could ever give you, and you're not supposed to be perfect. You know, you are perfection in the sense that you have made a mistake and you have acknowledged it and you have taken responsibility for it, and so it's not about this right and wrong, it's about experiences. It's not about success and failure, it's about experiences. It's about how we are programming ourselves to allow us the confidence to try, you know, when I say everything, obviously we're not advocating drugs and all of that sort of thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the human experience. But, you know, be brave enough to try something, you know, and if it doesn't quite work, then you will find out what the best fit for you is.
Yeah.
You know, but let's not be so hooked up on ticks and crosses that we're frightened to even explore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's better to find out if that thing worked sooner rather than later, rather than mulling it over and again wasting that valuable brain space.
Yeah.
And so do you believe that kids have got a path and a destiny of their own?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I think we all have. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes we forget that because of their chronological age.
Yes. And how is it that you bring out a child's genius?
Well, the answers are inside everybody, regardless of age. Yeah. And it's about trusting our inner guidance, our inner wisdom, that intuitive pull to certain areas. And the skill is zoning out from the noise outside. So we all were born with these innate gifts and wisdom, and then we're putting to school. And I know, you know, my kids go to school. School is fine. I was a teacher. I get it. Education, I'm a big fan. But I'm not a big fan of compartmentalizing kids. So, you know, the school system is great because it's an access to knowledge, but a whole education comes not just in school. It comes from experiences. It comes from, you know, all sorts of things. Education is not just for the classroom. And so, you know, children, I feel they know what their strengths are, but perhaps that's not what the expectations are from outside. And, you know, with my children, you know, they've come to me and said, you know, really nicely, you know, it's great after all the, you know, years of sleepless nights. And they said, we really appreciate your parenting style, Mum, because you've always said, what do you want to do? What do you think? How do you feel? What's your gut telling you? And the sooner you can tune into that, the better. And, you know, I'm not saying to my kid, I think you should be a lawyer. I think you should be a vet. I don't know what they're going to be.
Mm.
My main wish for my children is that they wake up in the morning feeling completely aligned, happy, content, empowered, passionate, and energized to start the day, whatever that looks like to them. And that can't be dictated to by anybody. Just like I wouldn't expect anyone to come in my experience and say, I think you should do this, this, and this, because on paper, these is your skill set. I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
I want to do
absolutely.
my thing.
Oh, I love it. Now, this will take us into, I guess, another darker period in your life as well. You mentioned that you had some depression.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so I had depression from quite a young age, so probably 19, 20, off the back of my AOSAD, I think, AOSD to Saturday morning. And I think I was trying to meet the expectations of everybody else, and I was ignoring my inner voice, my intuition, my passion, my everything. And I think that's why I so passionately do that with children and my children now, is because I was very lost for quite a long time, and I was doing everything that on paper made sense, but just wasn't the right fit for me. And so I've danced with depression all of my adult life. But again, it has been a blessing in many ways, because it's highlighted, why am I feeling like this when everything in my life on paper is great, you know? And I was talking to a dear friend of mine who lost her child, and she was sat with me, and when I was one of my first big deep dark pits of depression, and she said, but I don't get it. She said, everything's going right for you, and she said, I've lost a child and I didn't go into depression. And I said, yeah, and I totally honor that, and I respect that, and I hear that, and you know, but I said, all I can tell you is my thoughts don't match my emotions. So on an intellectual level, I knew I was lucky. I knew I had an amazing husband. We've been together 27 years. We're best of friends and had amazing children, a wonderful life, a great everything. But just this emptiness. And it's because I wasn't pursuing my God-given gift of empowering children. You know, and once I started to, it actually took me to nearly die having Taya before I fully embraced it. And I just felt, you know, my time here is precious. Every day is really a gift, and I'm not going to try and silence, avoid, you know, sideline this voice of mine anymore. I'm going to use it. And so that's when the depression really started to lift. And look, you know, I still have days where I think, right, it's a duvet day. Like I cannot speak to anyone, see anybody. I'm, you know, cocooning. And I think that's important, I think, for people to honor that. If they feel they need to detach and just be for a while, I think that's good, healthy, as long as you don't sit there for months.
Yes. And that's the thing is, I do believe that depression and feelings of anxiety are just normal waves that we experience. But what's not right is when it goes on for months and months. And this is where I will support my clients and say, look, if you have hit this crisis point, I wish I had have seen you earlier to support you and not get you to this point. Because when you're in that moment, it can be really hard to actually take action on the things that you know that deep down you want to do. But okay, if you really think you have to, go see the doctor and go get those anti-anxiety meds or those antidepressants, but look at being on them in the short term. Don't think you're going to be on them forever, because my issue is that sometimes I find it difficult, not difficult, you can, but it's more challenging and often a slower process working with someone on medication because they don't have the ups and downs. And that's sometimes they recognize that and they complain about that, having no libido, having no drive, no passion, not being able to feel sad or happy. And so we can't actually tap into how would your body respond if you felt that you were, visualizing what you want your life to look like. So go on those medications, but just think of it short term. But unfortunately, they say you've got to stay on them for at least 6 months, and then you've got to wean off them for another 6 months to a year. So depression and anxiety, I always say to my clients, it's normal. It's what tells you when things are out of kilter and you need to recalibrate something in your life, like you getting your pain in your body from your Still's disease or my skin flaring up, is I know how to listen and read into that before it has to get so bad, painful and debilitating. And you've spoken about a couple of themes that often comes up for me in these interviews and also working with my clients is what is that legacy you want to leave? And sometimes it is staring death in the face. It does have to get to that point to realize, actually, I'm not immortal, and how do I want to live the rest of my life? And so you almost died in childbirth.
Yeah. And I think as well, going back to guidance, like when we're getting pain, depression, any sort of symptom, it's guidance. It's our bodies, our universe, our inner selves, whatever it is, our higher divinity communicating with us. And I'm not negating medication. I think in some cases it's life-saving, but as it's a bridge. It's a bridge from where you are to where you want to be. And it doesn't mean you take the pill and that's it. You take the pill which supports you while you work through everything you need to work through to get rid of the symptoms that brought it on in the first place. Exactly. And with me, we get guidance, and we want it to be rainbows and flowers and sparkles and glitter and wrapped in a beautiful bow, and that's not how it works, actually. And I think the travesty in a lot of human experiences is everyone's looking for the rainbows and the bows and everything, and that's lovely and that's part of it for sure. But some of my best guidance, my best growth, my best times of expanding consciousness has been in the dark, painful, sludgy chrysalis, right between the caterpillar and the butterfly. And I think so many people are running away from that chrysalis, but that's actually where the magic happens.
Yes.
Where we need to work through it and grow from it and have these epiphanies and, have these, we've had incredibly dark times in our lives and I'm so grateful for them. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to go through it again because it's really hard, but I'm so grateful because the gifts at the end of that produce the most amazing miracles in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what I say is getting comfortable with discomfort. And I think there's actually quite a few studies out there saying that people who have no stress and challenges are just as prone to depression.
Well, I mean, you look at Tony Robbins, he could have retired at 20 something, and he went off and retired and had all the money he needed, and he got depressed, had no purpose, wasn't giving back anything, didn't have any drive, no passion, no nothing, and we're all looking for that, and everything is unique to you, and I remember when I was expecting my fourth child, there was a woman in the car park at the school, and she went, "Oh my God," she said, "your life is my idea of a nightmare." I just laughed and said, "Well, that's cool because it's not meant for you."
Yeah.
it's meant for me. And we need to just trust, and my husband, I'm very, very lucky with my husband because he just pretty much is cruisy. So I will come up with the most ridiculous things like, "Hey, we're going to move to Australia," and he's like, "Yeah, okay." "Hey, we're going to do this." "Yeah, okay." "Yeah, we're going to," and he knows that I've got this intuitive pull, and he's happy to go along because he knows it always works out. But nothing we've ever done ever makes sense on paper.
Yeah.
We have taken the most incredible risks because it just felt like the right thing to do. And it's almost like when I look back, I go, "Oh my God, like that was terrifying. Like none of that made sense. What was I thinking?" But it all worked out because it was just like, no, this is what I need to do. I need to contact that person. I need to go to that place. I need to, and getting into that rhythm. But if you're slapping band-aids all over yourself, and pretending that everything's fine and not doing the work and not going and not going deep, and I was talking to a client last week, an adult client of mine, and this lady is flat out 24/7. And I was listening to her on the call, and I want to do this, but I can't, blah, blah, blah. And I said to her, you can't run from it forever.
Mm.
And she said, what? And I said, everything that you're trying not to feel. And she instantly burst into tears. And I said, you need to make space of nothingness. And I said, you're scared of what's going to come up, but running away from it, you're going to get sick.
Yep, absolutely. It's just dropping into that feminine space and stopping being busy or in that masculine energy. That's when the body all of a sudden feels safe and lets all that emotion come up. And it is uncomfortable. And as you say, some people do it by moving countries multiple times. And it's not, well, sometimes the environment plays a huge factor, but it's not where you live. It really is coming home to yourself.
Absolutely. And you know what? It's scary.
Yeah.
Because as you come home to yourself, the shifts within you have a ripple effect in your environment and the relationships that you have, and
yeah.
so there is a lot of inner resistance from that, because how is it going to affect this friendship? How is it going to affect my marriage? How is it going to affect my workplace? How is it going to affect, because when I had my biggest shifts when Taya was born, I had to allow time and space for my family to catch up with me.
Yeah.
Because I've had massive shifts within myself, but I needed to allow them the opportunity to touch base with who I am now and what I feel now and where I'm going now. And there was some resistance there because it was affecting their experience.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of the times we go along with the day-to-day stuff because it's safe, because everybody's comfortable with that, and I remember in England, I actually helped a couple uncouple, and they were set up as the best amazing couple, and it was the perfect family, and it was this, but whatever reason, it shifted, and the resistance within that uncoupling came from how it was going to affect everybody around them, and they were almost willing to keep going just to keep the peace.
Yeah.
And not live what they knew in their soul was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting experience, although I'll never ever help a couple uncouple again. It was really exhausting. But it was really, really interesting to watch the dynamics there, because there was so much pressure from the outside to maintain the status quo. And I think it's an incredible act of courage if you're going to not even redefine yourself, just unleash what you're supposed to unleash onto the world. And you just have to have faith that the right people will stay and the right people will go, but the people that go create a void for all these amazing other people to rush into your life.
Absolutely. And it is, again, trusting the process, and for having people like you share your story to inspire that it is possible. And what's interesting is a lot of people that I guess get coached by people like us and other coaches is they think, well, my situation's unique, but we see that actually it's very similar. It's just a different story. And people do go through these really typical milestones. And I always say, just what do you want to do? Like, if it didn't matter the opinions of others, what would you actually choose to do? And that is one of the pivotal things that happens, or a milestone where I get excited because I know the change is coming, is that discomfort of the relationships, the social structure, the family relationships being challenged as you make these changes. And yeah, too many people do stay comfortable, or it's a little bit like, pain in the body. Would you rather, and not that pain means gain or anything like that, but would you rather stay in this low level of discomfort or go through temporary discomfort when you hit the spot and actually feel better in the long run?
Yeah, I'm a great believer in that. And you know, I'm the sort of person that I hit a block, and then I go completely inward, and I get the stick and I poke it in the wound, and I rub salt in, and I really unpack everything, and I think, what do I need to learn from this situation? How do I need to evolve? What's working, what's not working? And you know, the ripple effect in your life is incredible when you do that. But it's not easy to do, right?
Yeah.
It's you know, you've got to go deep. You've got to dig around. You've got to face parts of yourself that perhaps you don't want to face, you
Mm.
know, and that's confronting, you know, and people are naturally going to shy away from that because your ego is trying to keep you safe from anything that's any sort of discomfort at all. But you know, coming full circle back to the children, and you were saying about how my story is unique. Well, actually, no, lots of people are going through that, and that's one of my biggest frustrations as a teacher, was when I had child A who was displaying inappropriate behavior on every level, and child B who had unfortunately been, you know, subject to that behavior. And this clash, anger, us versus them, and me in the middle with all my confidentiality to protect, but going, oh, if only you knew what they were going through. I know you're such a wonderful, loving, empathetic, giving, kind family. You would embrace this kid,
Yes.
but I can't tell you.
I know that is the hard thing, isn't it? Sometimes will work with couples separately. I'm like, yeah, I won't share your parts of the story, but sometimes I'll say, I actually think you need to share this. And do you want me to help facilitate that? Because
Mm.
then I think they will understand why you're behaving this way.
And I also find, you know, with the communication thing, I've had people come to me, and let's say it's partners, and they've come to me and told me everything, all their grievances with their partner. And my response, you're telling the wrong person.
Yes.
I'm, I've got no say in this whatsoever. I cannot facilitate any change here. You need to go and communicate this to your partner.
Yeah.
You know, not aggressively, not you know, in the spirit and energy of, let's connect, let's break down these barriers, let's work through it, let's come to some sort of agreement, let's, you know. And it's like, you know, I'm very big on communication, and I think having ASD kids has helped me with that, because we're very, very direct, expressive. We don't hold anything back, because we can't assume that they've interpreted everything. So
Yeah.
we're very open with all of our communication. And, you know, it's like when, you know, oh, well, I shouldn't have had to tell him that I wanted him to do that. He should have known. I'm like, oh my God, I've been with my
Right.
husband for 27 years, right? We've been, you know, I met him when I was 17, and I would never even trust him to assume anything about me. You know, because I'm evolving, he's evolving, we're doing our own thing. So if something's happening, I explicitly communicate that,
Yeah.
you know. And you just have to, I don't know, it's, communication is such an undervalued commodity, and so is empathy,
Oh, yeah.
you know. And you know, with one of my children's books is called Dear Bully, and it's a love letter to the bully.
Mm-hmm.
It's saying, how can we help you? How can we support you? You have the right to feel safe and loved. And it's dealing with the thing of, everybody needs to feel safe and loved, and you need to feel safe, and so does everybody around you, which means you need to modify your behavior, etc., etc. But it's also about, you've done this for a reason. What's the reason? Let's help you and heal that reason, so that you don't feel the need to behave like this anymore.
Yeah.
And, you know, from my years of teaching, that was very much the thing, that we were, you know, yes, dealing with the behavior, having consequences, having responsibility, but right, let's do the next step now. Let's scoop you up, let's bring you in, and let's remind you of who you are.
Mm. So beautiful. Well said. You speak my language as well. So, if someone wanted to suss out your work, how do they find you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Cathy Domoney. So it's D-O Money. That's how you spell my surname, because it always gets a bit mixed up. So I'm there. I'm actually got my website under construction at the moment. So that's Decode Your Child Genius. And I've also got cathydomeny.com. So there's plenty of ways to find me. I think I'm the only Cathy Domoney out there. It's quite an unusual name, so you can find me wherever. Yeah.
I'll pop those links into the podcast notes. And how exactly do you work with children?
So when I work with children, I actually work with the whole family.
Good.
Because I found that coaching the child when they're feeling a disconnect, or they're feeling a little bit lost, or they haven't really connected in with their genius, or their genius are the reasons they've put aside to try and fit in. And then there's that sort of feeling lost and maybe a bit of depression and things like that. So we work together, and I empower the child and just reframe, take their points of pain and turn them into power and all that sort of thing. But I also work with the family as well, because it's this thing, that dynamic that I was talking about earlier, that you have shifts within yourself and then you need to facilitate the change within the environment. So I work very closely with the parents and the siblings, and we sort of evolve together, which is really beautiful. So yeah, I do like to do face-to-face, but with COVID at the moment, it's sort of online at the moment. But
And it's still possible to do this work online?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's great. So no, I'm very passionate about it, and the shifts in all areas of their world when they really connect with, and also reframing the experiences of the past, because sometimes that's holding us back. But when we can reframe it and identify it and do that work that we've been talking about earlier, and it sort of goes, ding, great, that was actually a gift. And now I can move forward really powerfully. So it's magical stuff.
Oh, it definitely is. Is there anything else you want to share with us?
I think lots of people are going through a really tough time. Last year was incredibly intense for us, not just for COVID, but because all of us were going through these massive evolutionary shifts within ourselves and as a family. So we sort of withdrew a little bit, and we've just been working through doing the inner work ourselves. And I think, from our experiences and my experience, if someone listening is going through a really hard time at the moment, something that I've thought of when I've been going through hard times is, this is just a chapter in my success story, which is like the modern way of saying this too shall pass. And I think, when you're in the depths of a dark place, sometimes you know what you need to do to help yourself get out, but you just don't want to. Like, you're completely apathetic. You just don't want to do anything. You're lethargic. You just want to wallow, And I think it's just about building, maybe you go from apathy to anger, and then you go from anger for frustration, and then you go frustration to hope, and hope to forgiveness, and you dig your way out. But one of the things that I've really held on to is, this is just a chapter in my success story. This is just a chapter in my, and that just kept me going. It gave me the possibility of hope that things were going to get better. And when we're in those deep dark places, that's what we need, is that sort of ray of hope, to keep us moving forward.
Oh, you're so articulate about all of this. It's great.
Thank you.
Thanks again for sharing your story and about ASD kids and your own multiple experiences that's led you on your path and your purpose of changing lives.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, it's been great. And, I just feel to not be yourself is such a travesty, because you were put on the earth to be unique, not to fit in. And all the things that you think are weird about yourself are your superpowers.
Nice one. Everyone can ponder on this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for
Thank
having me.
you. Bye.
Bye.